Welcome to Candid Dialogues with Plummer and Lorraine Baylor. Each week, we'll bring you wholesome and engaging conversations about things that matter to you and things that matter to us. We address life topics ranging from relationships to business and our personal favorite, spiritual things. Now, here are your hosts, Plummer and Lorraine.
Welcome to Candid Dialogues with Plummer and Lorraine. In this show, we talk about things that matter to you and things that matter to us. I'm Plummer, and this beautiful lady here is Lorraine.
We have a good topic for you today.
Yes.
First of all, we want to say thank you to everyone for sticking with us the last, is it 5-6 weeks now?
5 weeks. This is episode 5.
Episode 5, you guys.
Yeah.
And we know that some of you are in different time zone, but you take your time to come and spend it with us. So we really appreciate you.
Yes.
I am so excited about this topic tonight.
Yes.
Because I think it's really something that anyone can use.
Well, let me set it up, right? So, so you're in the thick of things, and things are kind of getting escalated, and you know in your mind they have just escalated way more than you would like, right?
Yes.
The good news though is that your rational mind is still thinking, and your rational mind sends a trigger and says to you, "Oh my goodness, man, you got to de-escalate before this thing gets out of hand to the point of no return." So the question is, how do you de-escalate when for all intents and purposes, really, you're already there? How do you de-escalate? So,
What are they de-escalating?
well, you tell them, really, which would be the topic for today. What is it?
De-escalating an argument. Or you can say a conflict.
Okay, de-escalating an argument, de-escalating. So what do we do? Where do we start? Where do we start?
I think you're better...
Well, okay.
You're better at verbalizing that than I am.
Well, yeah.
Well,
See,
we have to set a foundation.
for those of you who watch the 5 love languages, right? She knows one of my love languages is words of affirmation. So did you see how she did that? Well, I think you're better, right? So thank you very much. So anyway, okay. So I think
We're starting at the foundation.
Right. I think if you are going to, if we're talking about de-escalating an argument, right? Where you at that point where things have escalated, you're at a point of tension. It's good. I think it's good to always have a foundation, a place where you something that you can point to, a place where you can start, a place where you're tethered. And the picture that comes to mind is, growing up in Sierra Leone, people own sheep, they own goats and things like that. And the picture is you see like a goat or a sheep tethered to a tree, and there's this rope. Now the goat can dance around, it can play around here, but if it tries to go farther than the rope would allow it, boom, it gets there and the rope is like, you're not going anymore, right? Because why? It is anchored to somewhere that brings him back. So the point I'm trying to make here is, even if you're going to get, what's the word I'm looking for? Adept at de-escalating arguments, you gotta have some kind of foundation.
Yes.
A place to start, an anchor. I'm gonna use it this way because we used the bank analogy before. You've got to build your anchor bank.
Your anchor bank.
Right. So
we're coming up with all these new words.
we're making things up as they go, but they work.
They work.
Okay, so what goes in the anchor bank? And these are some of the things that we've talked about already in the past episodes. Keep in mind, folks, this series, we're talking about effective communication in relationships. We talked about that. We've talked about managing your expectation in relationships, I think, the last 2 weeks. So today we're really going to look at how do you de-escalate an argument, right? Because maybe your expectations aren't met. Next thing you know, it's escalated. So we're saying build this anchor bank. What goes in the anchor bank? Well, some of the things we've talked about already in the first few episodes. One of them would be what? Anything you value, you will nurture. That should be in that bank.
That should be in that bank.
Right.
And I think that we have to throw in there this question: do you believe that that you have each other's best interests at heart? Do you believe that the person that you're in relationship with have your best interests at heart? Then you have to ask yourself the question, do you have their best interests at heart?
Okay.
There's no doubt in my mind, Plumber and I, and we do get into arguments or heated discussions,
Arguments.
There's never a time in my mind that I think that he doesn't have my best interests at heart. We might see things differently, we might approach them differently, but one thing I definitely know, that his desire for me is always good. And I believe that he knows also that my desire for him is always good.
And that's a really good place. So when we talk about the anchor bank, that's what we're talking about. Those things, I think we call them the non-negotiables, right? They could go in that other pack. Would it be safe to say that that we have to assume positive intent?
Oh, absolutely. The minute that we begin to think that that person is either taking advantage of us or they're saying them before us, we're at that point where we're on the defensive already. We're taking that position of defense. Forget the offensive. We're here to defend ourselves.
Right.
And if you're there to defend yourself, you're thinking about self. You have no interest in what that other person is dealing with, because your whole idea is self-preservation.
Well, talk a little bit about, because I know when we were discussing earlier, you were talking about how a lot of arguments start with the little things.
Yes, it is.
Talk about that.
And those little things can begin to build up if
Right.
they're not taken care of. I know a lot of people say don't sweat the small stuff.
Right.
And the intention behind saying that is that don't take these little supposed little things and
Don't make a mountain out of a molehill.
Yeah, don't make a mountain out of a molehill.
Right.
You don't have to sweat the small stuff, but you have to pay attention to the small stuff so that they don't become the big stuff.
I love it.
Say, for instance,
things don't start out big. They always
don't.
start out small.
They did. They
like an avalanche. An avalanche starts out like a real small thing. Next thing you know, it's like, ooh, it snowballs. Yeah.
Have you ever seen a big anthill? It starts out like this little teeny hole with a hole in the middle, and then it grows and grows and grows unless it is attended to.
Yeah. So let's just keep in mind, we're still talking about building that anchor bank, right?
Yes.
So pay attention to the small stuff. What else? I'm sorry, I cut you off there. Go ahead.
I lost my train of thought. You move on.
Well, it's okay. So we were talking about don't sweat the small stuff, but pay attention to the small stuff, because it is the small stuff that builds up.
I'm gonna give an example.
It's one of the things I share is a quote. I saw this. I don't even know how long ago I saw it, but it says, "Small hinges open big doors."
Yes.
Small hinges open big doors. The little things, things. I'm gonna put this plug. I've got a book I'm writing right now. It's on leadership, but it's called Small Hinges Open Big Doors. It's basically, the whole idea is do the little things, do them well, do them consistently, do them regularly. You will find success. So yes, don't sweat the small stuff, but pay attention to the small stuff. Yeah.
And I'll give you an example. Okay. This is a cultural thing, and maybe in some cases it's a Lorraine thing, okay?
Right.
So for me, I don't like anyone eating off my plate. So if I go and I fix my plate, I'm going to fix exactly what I want, no more, no less. Okay, I might eat less, but I don't want no more, But I don't want anyone putting their fork or spoon, especially if they haven't asked me, in my food.
Don't you see that? Like people go out to eat. You see all these couples, nice and lovely, just to reach over and take someone else's food.
But that doesn't work for me. I don't like, and it's not that. I would rather go and buy you a whole meal. Okay, I'd rather buy you and have. But say, for instance, culturally speaking. My husband has told me examples of, and I've experienced it because when I went to Africa, we did that in the village, where everyone eats from this communal plate.
This
you know,
this bowl, this big bowl, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And everyone eats from that communal plate, you know. So everyone sits around and they're eating from that plate. Well, that's not how we were growing up. You know, everybody get a portion, big, small, or little, whatever that portion. But you eat what's on your plate. Mm-hmm. You do not go to anyone else's plate. So we've had a couple of instances where he'll just stick his fork in my plate.
I'll say something, but you know, simultaneously.
Finish. So anyway, we learn real quick that doesn't work, right? Mm-hmm. But every once in a while he'll forget. But then I had to retrain myself that, you know, it's something that doesn't have to, we don't have to cause it to be a big thing, because in his mind he can develop this idea that she's just selfish.
Yep.
And it's all about her.
Not even in this mind. It's what used to be. Mm-hmm. I used to ask you, why are you like this? Mm-hmm. When you come and ask me for something, right, I just hand you my whole plate, mm-hmm. and you take a couple of spoonfuls, but whenever I come and ask you, it's like, go fix yours, or you want to go fix, I just want to taste.
Uh-huh. And I mean, the pot could be right there, and I want to walk over to the pot and fix him a nice plate. And but it's about something about my own plate.
And in my mind, I'm processing it as if she's just selfish.
Yeah.
She's greedy. She's mean. Doesn't like sharing. And so, folks, again, the key here, right? Okay. Don't sweat the small stuff, but pay attention to the small stuff. Mm-hmm. And it was not until we had the conversation, we talked about it, literally explained to each other why, okay, this is why, this is, now you got to get to that place where you understand that, you know, what floats their boat, what gets their boat.
And it doesn't mean that, say for instance, I mean, every once in a while he still does it. He'll put his fork over on my plate, you know, but I know that he's not doing it to irritate me.
That's the takeaway there.
I know that we've talked about this and he understands that. And it's not that I hoard food or anything. It's just that when I fix my plate, I fix it with the exact amount. It's just methodical kind of thinking. I'll give an example. You know, like I sent my daughter to see some relatives when she was much smaller, and they opened the suitcase. And Lorraine had everything. I had her shorts and her shirt.
Outfits.
Everything compartmentalized. Compartmentalized in such a way that when her aunt opened, she's like, she thought I was crazy. But it's just, we all have our little quirks, So
the key here is, again, we're talking first of all about the foundation. Even before we get to the escalating, you got to have something that you are tethered to. You got to have something that you're tethered to. So what you value, you will nurture. Seek first to understand and then to be understood.
Rather than seeking first to be understood.
Right. So pay attention to the small stuff. And then don't play the blame game.
Yeah.
Because what ends up happening now, so you're getting closer to this escalation, right? All of a sudden, so let's stick with the food example that she gave. In my mind, we said assume positive intentions. But in my mind, I'm thinking, I ask her, why would you even do that? But then it goes back to the things we've talked about, the tone of my voice, how I say it, how I ask her, why would you even do that? Because that tone could come off as accusatory. And if that happens, next thing you know, that defensive wall comes up. And once that defensive wall goes up, it's a battle. You are in that space now. So how do we retreat? So again, first of all, the blame game, the name calling, it doesn't work. It doesn't accomplish anything for the ultimate good. Another thing that we can talk about, that anchor bank, right? So now we're talking about the knowledge base that needs to go into that anchor bank. In the Bible, there's in James chapter 1, James chapter 4 and verse 1, it says this, and I want to read that. It says, what causes fights and quarrels among you? It's a rhetorical question because he answers it right after that. It says, don't they come from your desires that battle within you? right? So the bottom line is there's a common source of every single argument or conflict that we experience, and that every single fight or flight moment that we have,
Yes.
every single thing that escalates beyond, the common source of that is what? Desires that come from within you. You don't have your way, so you battle. You don't have your way, so you fight. Now, I'll say this, folks. If you can own this idea, embrace this idea, right? That every fight, every quarrel, every argument that escalates starts from inside of you.
Yes.
The minute
You
so
mean
now
I
we're
have to own that?
you gotta own it,
Oh,
baby.
man.
You gotta own it. You gotta put your stamp on it. You gotta put your stamp on it. You gotta frame it. You gotta put it up like a certificate because it's yours. Right? Okay. So
I don't want it.
so if you own this idea, it immediately takes the conflict down a couple of notches. It takes the temperature down. So again, we're talking about how do you de-escalate, right? So first of all, you got to build this bank, right? This anchor bank, right? Oh, and one of the things, well, we didn't identify it as an anchor, but I just went there. For us, right, it's scripture.
Yes.
You got to have common ground, something that you can point back to. And that is what really saved it. It really, I mean, can we just put it out there? First 2 years of our marriage was horrible. I'm talking divorce territory, horrible. But we had this one thing in common.
Yes.
One thing in common. So for
That
those
we
of
wanted
you,
to please God.
we wanted to please God. We wanted to honor God.
And you know what? Those first 2 years, it wasn't a question in my mind whether or not he loved me or not. I mean, that was not the question, or I don't think that was a question for him either.
It wasn't either.
The issue was that we had so many cultural adjustments that we had to make because, again, he's from Africa, I'm from Barbados, I've lived in America for so long. And then we had outside influences that were trying to really knock. And we had...
Well, that's a whole other series right there. The
Yeah,
outside influences.
but we had a series of different events that led to all of that pressure that new couples tend to have and have to navigate through. You know, I want to kind of detour here because you had a conversation today, and we want to give a big shout out to Auntie Olive and Uncle Madupe, who's on their
57th wedding anniversary today. Yes.
So he called her up and had a little chit chat with her, and she said something to you that I think you should share.
Well, remind me, she said a lot.
Yeah, she said a lot, but she was talking about the hurt that happens when you get into the arguments and how it affects your family.
Oh yes. So these are things that we have to think. So again, we're talking about we're talking about de-escalating, right? So you kind of jumped onto a point number one. I was going to bring that up later, but that's okay. So it's all right. So
see how he adjusted for me.
We have to begin. Well, you know what? Let's just go there, right? Let's just go there. So,
no, come on, share with them what.
Yeah, I am. Right? Okay. So we want to share some tips on de-escalating, right?
Yes.
On de-escalating an argument. And one of the things that she shared with us, we're going to get them on here by the grace of God. We're going to get them and they're going to share with us because that's one of the things we said we'll do. We're going to get people who have experienced things, people who are professionals and that kind of stuff. And they've been doing this for 57 years.
57 years,
yeah. So anyway, she said oftentimes we don't think about the harm that it does. It's not just about us. Again, remember, so the desires from within us. So asking yourself, why am I escalating?
Yeah.
It's because I'm not getting what I want. But then we try to, we justify that. I think that's the language you used today. We try to justify that. But now on the other end of it, the question to ask is, what about the people around me? right? Now I've got my way. What about people around me? What about if it's a married couple with children? What about the children?
Yes.
What about the co-workers? If that kind of stuff, if that kind of stuff happens. So we've really got to pay attention to that, because that whole selfish thing, at the end of the day, every argument that de-escalates, it starts with a desire inside of you that you perceive is not being met. Yes. You perceive it's not being met, and so you allow yourself to, you allow it to de-escalate. So let's do this, because I kind of want to finish also with the anchor bank before we move on to. We have 6 tips for you folks for de-escalating an argument. One more thing I think that needs to go in that anchor bank. Oftentimes you'll hear people say, well, go apologize, go say I'm sorry. People say, go say I'm sorry. I'm saying, before you get to the sorry part, before you get to the apology, if the apology is going to be genuine, you've got to learn to forgive.
Yes.
Because if I'll give an example. There's someone that we're discipling, we're using that language, we're mentoring, and they were in a situation recently, and they shared with us, and the person, did we ask them to go apologize, or did the person,
we asked them to respond.
Right. So the person sent a text to them apologizing, right? And then we asked them to respond, because they were in a relationship. It's a friendship relationship, close relationship. And so we asked this individual, we said, well, respond, acknowledge the fact that they have, apologized. I said, but you also apologize, because it's also a two-way street. That's when he got interested. They said, well, you know what? I can't really say I'm sorry, because I'm really not sorry for what happened. And they said, you taught me not to lie. You taught me not to lie, to lie. And then it dawned on me. Oftentimes we say, you gotta, and now, we're talking about the other end of the escalation, okay? We will talk about what to do it before you get there. But on the other end of the escalation, the outcome on the other side of that mountain that you built, right? People will often say, apologize. Well, if your apology is going to mean something, you've got to learn to forgive first. It is after you have forgiven. I have read this Bible, and I really haven't seen anywhere where it says, go and say I'm sorry. It'll say go and make amends, right?
Go forgive.
And yes, forgive. So after you have forgiven, I think that's what prepares the heart to be able to say, I'm sorry.
Yes.
And it does say, godly sorrow leads to repentance.
Yes.
Which is like a change of heart. You have a change of mind. That way now we're able to begin to heal on the other side. So. And
I'm going to jump in and say, I understood where that individual was coming from, because I myself had a situation with an individual where I had pretty much warned them the first time. I warned them the second time, and I warned them the third time. And we're pastors. By that fourth time, they felt like they need to bring me to the pastor.
Yeah.
This was the fourth time coming to the pastor, complaining.
They had to tell her to the pastor.
To the pastor, who happens to be him. Well, to make a long story short, I had it. I don't explode. I'm not one but that one I explode, because I felt like they were threatening my relationship. So I felt some kind of way about that. So I just lost it, and I let them have it. And I'm telling you, I felt so justified doing it. Because I've never lost it like that before, but I felt like they were threatening our relationship.
And I
had warned them 3 times. This is the 4th time. I mean, 3 strikes you out, but this is the 4th time. It is over.
She went for it. I mean, name calling. She named this person all kind, and I'm sitting there. I'm like, oh my gosh.
But I didn't curse. I don't curse.
No, she doesn't use foul language. But I mean, the name calling. I was like, who is this person, right? And then
I had worked so hard at my relationship. I felt like they were threatening. I was like, boom. But again, my flesh was justifying what I was doing. I felt justified to defend myself. When in reality, the Bible says, be angry, but sin not. And I will tell you, I was literally angry. And he tells me, he said, you need to go back and apologize. And I said the exact duplicate of what this other individual, well, I'm not sorry, so I really can't go back and, because it's not, they deserve it. And I felt like they deserve it. Well, it took me about 3 or 4 days to calm down. It did. And when the person said, can we talk, blah, blah, blah. But by that time, they didn't want to deal with me. They were like, no, it's over. Well, give me some time. Basically, they were saying that I ain't talking to you anymore. But the reality of it is, it took me a minute to get myself together and be able to say, I forgive this person. I continue to pray for them, even though at that point, I continue to pray for them. I continue to love, because I understand that this person was coming from a hurt position in the sense that hurting people hurt people.
Yeah. So
from that individual's hurt position, they were constantly coming at me.
Just poking the bear.
Yeah. And I was not emotionally in a position at that time that I could rationalize and de-escalate, because I was, by the 4th time, I was really out there. So make a long story short, there's no justification, because of course it ended up in a relationship that was definitely severed. It was already shaky, but it was a severed relationship from there, and no one won. I didn't win, the individual didn't win, and God was not glorified.
If you try to get your way, go back to the fact where it says quarrels, arguments, dissensions, conflict, they come from your desires. That word desire is a strong word. It comes from your desires within you. So when we talk about the escalating argument, that's really what we're taking. That's really what we're talking about. How do we tame the beast? How do we tame this desire beast, right? Again, going back to that anchor bank, we talked about a few things. We decided very early in our relationship that we were not going to let our hearts harden against one another. I purpose in my heart, I'm not gonna, again, if you say things like, if you assume positive intent, it's very difficult for you to have your heart harden against the other person. Doesn't matter who that other person is in the relationship. So you've got to make a decision. You've got to make that decision. And one of the things I will recommend is when you're having this conversation with yourself, right? Remember this. A decision is only as good as the action that you take.
That's right.
A very good friend of mine, I hear him say that a lot. We used to train together. And this is one of the things that he would say. A decision is only as good as the decision that you take.
Action.
Yes, as the action that you take. So you can make the decision, but are you going to put it into action, right?
And it's the same thing. Everything that we've talked about prior to this, in terms of how, the value of having effective communication, the things that you have to have in place, if you're not practicing those, are at least working on them, it takes in some cases it takes years. If you're not working on them and you haven't made a decision to, we can talk till we're blue in the face. This conversation won't mean nothing to you, and it won't be any of value or any. You won't get any results from it. But if you make a decision that, you know what, I want to better myself and I want to better my relationship, because in de-escalating scenarios with my husband and I I have to always consider, does he have my best interest in heart? But at the end of the day, what do I want? What is my vision? What is my desire? What is the end result I want for us?
That's right.
You know,
That's right.
when we're 80 years old and, you know, rocking in the chair.
We've read this scripture for you before, but I want to read it. And, you know, some of you here may not be folks who read the Bible, but one of the things we've said, right, really, this is what informs our approach to life. This is really the very foundation of our anchor bank is scripture. Ephesians 4:29-32. I'm going to read it. It says, "Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. And do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God, with whom you were sealed for the day of redemption." Verse 31 says, "Get rid of bitterness, rage, anger, brawling, and slander, along with every form of malice." It says get rid of it. That means someone is not going to get rid of it for you. You have to get rid of it for yourself.
Yes.
You've got to empty yourself out of that. It says be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ God forgave you. So forgiving, starting with being able to learning to forgive, learning to let things go. I think that's what leads to the place of sorrow. So let's talk now. Let's share, because we have 6 tips for you. 6 tips for de-escalating an argument. You wanna just run down all 6. Yeah.
The first one is focus on a preferred future. Begin with the end in mind, and he's going to go into further into them. Avoid tick for tack. I think you can figure that one out. Point out the escalation.
That would be number 3, right? Point out the escalation.
Yes, the third one is point out the escalation. The fourth one is take responsibility for your part of the escalation. And then number 5, accept the other person's point of view. Validate their experience.
Right.
And number 6, stick with the facts. Focus on the behavior and not the person.
Okay. All right. Well, let me break that down a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. And by the way, at some point during this week, we're going to actually create a PDF and put those online for you guys, so you can download it. And folks, listen, you got to put in the work. So number 1,
They're going to download it from where?
they're going to download it either from Facebook or from. We'll put a link in YouTube to our website. We do have a website. It's going to be fully launched by some point this week. So if you go to the website now, you'll see some nice things, but really has nothing there that is worth it. So once we launch the website, we'll let you know. You'll be able to download this. So,
Nothing there that's worth it?
well,
It doesn't have the full content that he desires.
Okay. All right. Okay. So number 1. So tip number 1. Focus on a preferred future. Begin with the end in mind. We talked about the book that Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. One of the things he says is begin with the end in mind. So have a preferred future. Ask yourself, what's going to happen on the you should have a picture of the outcome that you want. What's going to happen on the other side of this escalation mountain that I climbed? What's going to happen on that other side, right? So focus on that picture. You feel yourself, because I will say this, right? You feel yourself getting there, right? You feel yourself elevating. Your body tells you that you're about to explode, right? An escalation, as quickly as it might happen, it doesn't happen without any notice. Your body tells you. Your body will tell you, okay?
Your emotions, it could be sweating. It could be heat,
Your face could get flushed.
Your stomach tightens. It's just, but your body will signal.
It will signal to you. So how do you begin to de-escalate? When you get that signal, learn to recognize that signal and to respect that signal. Right? It's a warning sign. Learn to, it's like you're driving on the street and you see a sign that you don't normally see, but it says, hey, flood warning. right? There's
Yes.
the road has been flooded. Pay attention to it.
Yeah.
The people who drive into the flood and their cars get stuck, hey, I try to have empathy, but dude, there was a sign said there's a flood there. Don't drive your car in.
Hey, we're gonna see you on the news.
You show up on the news and say, "Oh, that's anyway." Okay, so number one, focus, right? Focus on a preferred future.
Yes.
Once you feel that warning sign, train yourself, and it's a habit. You develop a habit. Habits
Yes.
are developed by repetition.
Yes.
None of what we're saying here is going to happen overnight.
Yeah.
So just train yourself, right? Train yourself. Make it a habit. Make it a habit. Focus on the outcome. Focus on the outcome, right? And then the second tip you mentioned was avoid the tit for tat.
Oh yeah.
An eye for an eye don't work no more. Okay? An eye for an eye doesn't work. The tit for tat. Well, you said this. Well, you said this. You said,
or you did this.
yes, you're straight. You're going straight into the escalation zone, and by the time you realize it, so just avoid it. Again, this is one of those things that needs to be a habit. A habit. Pay attention to the warning signs.
And sometimes you just gotta give people a little bit of grace. You gotta give people a little bit of grace to make mistakes.
I love that language.
We're all gonna make mistakes. Unless you're God, which I don't think any of us are, we're going to make mistakes. And when you acknowledge that you make mistakes, then you understand that you got to give grace to those that do.
And that language, give them grace. It goes hand in hand with assuming positive intent.
Yes.
So avoid the tit for tat. Avoid the tit for tat. You don't repay evil with evil.
Overcome evil with good.
Overcome evil with good. So don't buy into it. Don't buy into that. To that. The third tip that we have is point out the escalation, and by that I mean verbalize. Right, verbalize that you see there's a rise in tension. So when that warning sign comes, so for example, let's say Lorraine and I are having a conversation. It's kind of heated, and by the way, folks, people will argue. People will get angry. It's an emotion. And your emotions are hardwired inside of you. It's a healthy hardwire inside of you, right? People will argue, but in your anger, the Bible says, don't sin.
It is an unhealthy thing not to be able to control your emotions.
Right.
And if you see someone that constantly is on the, and no matter what you do, you can't bring them down, that's not a healthy person.
Right.
And sometimes you have to change or adjust yourself. And it doesn't mean that you have to be the stomping ground or anything.
Right.
But you can use wisdom to work around until, sometimes you got to be the example to show that person how it's done, because they might not know how to, they might not know how to de-escalate.
Right. So, So going to the point where it says, point out the escalation, right? So you verbalize that you feel it. So let's say you and I are in this conversation that I'm beginning to feel the tension rise. What I mean by point out the escalation is like, listen, honey, I get the sense that we're beginning to kind of elevate to the point, right? Do you sense it as well? Okay, so you're kind of inviting them into that space. And if you can get an agreement and say, yes, I'm sensing this, you know what, well, maybe we need to back off a little bit. So point out the escalation. So oftentimes what we would say is things like, why are you yelling at me? Well, those are fighting words because that individual may not feel like they're yelling.
Yeah.
I always say, I'm just passionate, right? Right? So instead, we can try and say something like, you know what? It seems like things are getting tense, right? Why don't we just, a step away from a minute, right? So let's say she's raising her voice and she doesn't raise her voice, but let's say she's raising her voice. If I say to her, why are you yelling at me, right? I think you gave the example, our daughter our youngest said that to you one time,
Yeah,
right?
she said it to me. She's like, "Why?" She said it more than one time, and I'm like, "Wait a minute, what does she mean?" And it took a moment for me to really click and realize that she's saying your tone of voice.
Your tone of voice. So point out. What she was doing really was pointing out the escalation.
Yeah.
Right. So another way would do, because when you say, "Why are you yelling at me right now?" That you is an attack.
Yeah, it's pointing at the person.
Right. So use I language instead of using you language. You know. So that's one. And then the next tip you mentioned was take responsibility for your part of the escalation. Gotta own it. It's a two-sided street, folks.
But I want you to own it.
Folks, I'll say this. And oftentimes when I say this,
he's good at owning. I gotta stop here and say he's really good at owning.
Well, thank you very much. Oftentimes when I share this with my coaching clients or with the people in some of the classes that I teach, when I say this, people you can tell it's like, and I know some of you are going to feel that way when I say it, but folks, listen, no one can make you angry. Hear me well. No one can make you angry. Anger is a choice. You choose to get angry. You're talking about de-escalating. That means you've made the choice. You're like, you know what? I just need this one thing, right? And then you validate. You validate your actions to go over the escalation. So anger is a choice. So take responsibility of your part in the escalation. You choose to go there. You choose to go there. So the key is to begin to recognize those warning signs. Like I said, those physiological warning signs are. And the question I would ask is, for you or for you who are listening, for you who are watching, how do you tell yourself to calm down? For me, I talk to myself. And here's my favorite thing for saying to myself. Plumber, we're not going there today. When I say plumber, we're not going there today, it is a huge signal for me. I would say I've got about an 80-85% success ratio, rate, right? But when I say plumber, we're not going there, I might verbalize it or I might just think it to myself, plumber, we're not going there today. That is a clear signal that plumber, you're escalating, you need to de-escalate, right? So you've got to figure out your own for yourself. One of my coaching clients, she said, she asked herself, will you feel the same way in the next 10 minutes? That's the question she asked herself, right? So it goes back really to number one, where we said, focus on the future, right? Will you feel the same way? So take responsibility for your part in the action. It's a two-way street. Okay, no one can make you angry. And then we said, accept the other person's point of view. Got to validate their experience. Got to validate their experience.
And you know what? I want to say to that point, in the job that I work at, before we call them escalations, before an escalated call gets to me, we've trained and taught how to give some basic steps on how to de-escalate the call or to attempt to. But by the time the call gets to me, they are 1 to 10, they're at a 10. And one of the ways that I've found that really brings them down is to validate their experience, to acknowledge that, hey, I know, I address their feelings, I address their feelings. I understand, and sometimes there's certain words you don't use because sometimes you don't understand. So I don't say, I understand.
You don't understand what
because sometimes you don't fully understand, but there are certain words that you'll use to allow the person to see that I hear you. I hear you. And it's not that it's just going in one ear and this, I respond to them in a way that let them know that I care about you and I want to fix it.
There's a very popular saying, you may have heard it, goes something like this: people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So you got to show them that you care.
A measure of empathy.
Yes.
You definitely have to. And a lot of times is just the tone of voice. Because again, they're at a 10. So, I know to be calm. I address, how are you feeling? Is everything okay? And if they're rational, you got to get them to a rational point where they'll listen to you, because they're not going to listen to you at a 10. So I have to address their feelings. I have to validate their experience, and I have to offer them my help. Okay, how can I help change this for you? Or, how can we do better?
Yeah. So accept the other person's point of view. Validate their experience. Don't trivialize it. Now, to accept doesn't necessarily mean you agree. Okay, people will self-de-escalate when they believe that you accept their point of view.
Yes.
When they believe you accept their point of view, they will you don't need to agree with that other person's point of view, right, to resolve things, right? But an argument can get heated. It can get really heated if you keep acting like the person is totally delusional. So accept doesn't necessarily mean you agree, but just accept their point of view. Accept that it's their reality, it's their hurt. So,
and they need to know that you care about what concerns them, because a lot of times the thing that is verbalized, what they verbalize, is not. A lot of times that's not the real issue.
Right.
You
that's
the effect of what they're truly angry at or angry about. But you have to be able to hear. You have to be able to hear what they're truly saying, and the only way that you can do that is to come from a heart of compassion.
Right.
In other words, you before me.
Right. And also, because we're talking about de-escalating. Personally, de-escalating for me, when I accept your point of view, when I validate your experience, it does something for me.
And the thing is, I can tell when he truly is attempting to understand, even if he doesn't understand. The fact that he's trying, say for instance, just recently we had a
okay. Can't wait to hear this
one. we had a discussion, and it didn't get like heated discussion, but we could tell that there was some hurt feelings there on my part. And he rushes into the room and he's like, "Help me to understand. Help me to understand." And I was from the standpoint of, well, in my mind, it's like, well, you should understand. You should understand. But at that point, I could see that he was clueless to what I was, but he really wanted to understand. Do you remember?
I remember exactly.
But he wanted to understand but I could feel that he truly wanted to understand. So for me, that was the calming factor right there. That was the, okay, we're okay kind of thing.
Good. All right, and then we got one more. Stick with the facts. Focus on the behavior, not the person. Because oftentimes, once we begin to get, when you focus on the person, then that defensive wall goes up, right? That defensive wall goes up. And so stick with the facts. Stick with what you've observed. And those two actually go hand in hand. The last one that we just talked about, where we said accept the other person's point of view. So let's say, for example, both of us were beginning to feel the tension going up, right? And you show me, right, that you accept my point of view, right? And when you stick with the facts, and we talk about the behavior. This is the behavior. It's not like, well, you did this, because the minute we go back to you, it becomes personal, and then that defensive wall goes up. So stick with the facts. Focus on the behavior, not the person, because you focus on the person, then you resort to name calling and that kind of, and the escalation just does not go. So
and another thing too is, you're having a conversation about a banana. Don't bring the apple in. You know, the conversation is not about the apples, so stick with the banana.
Yeah, it's about the banana.
In that instance, you're not trying to resolve the issue with the apple. You're trying to resolve the thing with the banana. But if you're pulling every argument into one, you're never resolving anything.
And you know how you can tell that you're pulling all the apples into, you know, all the other things into it? When you catch yourself saying, oh, and another thing. It's like, check. And another thing. Check. And another thing. Dude, I mean, it's a list, right? Mm-hmm. Then it becomes nagging. Yeah. No one wants to be nagged at. No one. So, you know, bottom line, folks, these tips, and we need to round it up. These tips, 6 of them. Number 1, focus on a preferred future. Begin with the end in mind. Number 2, avoid the tit for tat. Just avoid it. The tit for tat. Point out the escalation. If you feel, you know, those warning signs are coming, acknowledge, say, hey, listen, you know, I kind of saw that sign that there's a flood down there, right? There's a flood, so, you know, we got to turn back. We're not going into the flood. Number 4, take responsibility for your part in the escalation. Remember this, no one can make you angry. It's a choice. You have a choice, yes. Give some grace. Assume positive intent. Number 5, accept the other person's point of view. Validate their experience. People don't care how much you know, how much you feel until they know that you care. Yeah, show them that care, and then stick with the facts. Focus on the behavior. Yeah. But yeah, that's it. This was fun.
I enjoyed it.
I know, right? Yes. All righty.
All right.
We're signing out. Blessings to you.